We begin our tour at Lums Pond in Sussex, Delaware's southernmost county, where one can find the northernmost population of thriving bald cypress trees.
Well, bald cypress have been sort of in retreat to coastal areas for thousands of years, but possibly because we're on a peninsula with lots of moisture around here and the right amount of rainfall and the right amount of soils, bald cypress have hung on here longer. Along the eastern seaboard, we're the furthest most north natural population. You can find bald cypress trees growing in Toronto, Canada, but they don't produce young. This is a native population that's part of our ecosystem. A couple things have occurred to make it such a picturesque spot. The little stream that they dammed to create Lums Pond, cypress was one of the few trees that could withstand the flooding in the pond. And so when you look out over the pond, they're still growing out of the pond.
I think the fact that so much of it has been lost reflects how people were looking at land over time, that they didn't see the swamp as something to be preserved. They saw it as something that, can we do something to make it different? And the fact that it has been preserved to some extent is thanks to the Resettlement Administration in the late 1930s buying a lot of the land to develop into a park.
They're so different than any other deciduous or coniferous tree that you see in our woods. And they're more of an emblem of the southern U.S. So I think people are surprised to see them here. You know, the image of bald cypress is associated with alligators and Spanish moss and Georgia and Florida, you know, in the Carolinas. But it is, I guess, our southern part of Delaware, and its, you know, association with the southern United States, just like much of northern Delaware is more associated with the northern part of the United States. Small state, a lot of contrasts.
Killins Pond State Park is located on a branch of the Murder Kill River. For someone visiting Delaware, it might seem that the names of these two bodies of water are related to the legend of an Indian massacre of the Dutch in the 17th century. This is even referenced on the park state website. However, much of the land around the pond was once owned by the Killin family in the mid-19th century, giving the pond its name. As for the Murder Kill River, the legend of the massacre may be just that.
The name Kill is the Dutch word for river. And some people have suggested that instead of murder, we should be hearing Mother Kill, the Mother River. The origin has always been very speculative and historic.
But what we do know is that the land in Killins Pond State Park has had some interesting tenants.
This mill was sold on to a number of individuals, one of whom was a man named Stroud. The adjoining property was actually owned by an African-American farmer named Charles Tilton with his family. We have an unusual amount of documents for Charles Tilton. He didn't operate the mill, he probably worked there, but he was a farmer. He died in the fall, and so we have records of the crops that he was growing and things like that.
Our final stop on the tour is Lums Pond State Park. To understand the history of Lums Pond, one first must understand the history of the nearby C&D Canal, which has been in the works for longer than many realize.
As far back as the 1660s, a Czech map maker looked at the area and suggested that it would be a really good idea to build a canal between the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware River. But that didn't actually come to fruition until about 1804, when a private corporation put itself together and actually began construction.
Well, they got some money. They started to dig the C&D Canal in 1804. In 1806, they quit because they ran out of money. So then some more time passes, and finally in 1822, the project gets revived again. And this time it really happens. Again, it's a project that involves Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware. The states each put in some money. Pennsylvania puts in the most. There are private investors. And also the federal government puts in a large chunk of money this time around. So this time they actually do dig the canal. The canal was finally finished in 1829, so you can see that it's a long time period to dig the canal.
So how does Lums Pond, a mill pond built in 1734, fit into the story of the C&D Canal?
The U.S. government took it over in 1819. It really was used by the Corps of Engineers essentially to hold fill from the time that they dredged the canal various times. It eventually was declared surplus, the whole area, in the mid-1950s, and then this slow, kind of agonizing process of acquiring the land for the state began. But it really was just kind of adjunct to the canal itself.
So do you think that we'd have a Lums Pond State Park if it wasn't for the C&D Canal?
No. No, the other thing about Lums is when the Corps in 1963 straightened the canal, in the process of doing that, it created an area closer to Summit that would eventually become what is today's marina. So the other feature of the Lums Pond area is what is now this wonderful marina on the canal that gives everybody boating access.
You can access these 3 Delaware state parks daily from 8 a.m. to sunset. Daily fees are in effect from March 1st to November 30th. This is Ben Schmidt for WDDE News.